had a chance to have lunch, maybe something occurred to you while you're eating your alcohol. What about it?
So I don't know, what about yes, no?
I drink it every night. I'm not a health food fanatic, I'm a bodybuilder. Two different things.
What do you drink? Why?
Sometimes. Usually vodka at the gym. But not that much, really. I don't get drunk every night. I reserve that for each post-Olympia night. If there are no more questions on diet, we'll get into training a little bit here. How many people here have heard of the Colorado experiment? Raise your hands. Chris, have you ever heard of it? Are you familiar? Okay. A couple of you have. In 1973, the exercise physiology department of Fort Collins University conducted an experiment with a number of individuals, the most famous of which is Casey Viator. The nature of the experiment was intended to find out, hello, Mr. Kennedy, thanks for the issue, was to find out how rapidly individuals could gain muscle in a high-intensity training program. And what they did was, well, since Casey was the most famous, we'll talk about Casey, and also because his results were the most outstanding. Talk about how much muscle he gained in 28 days on a high-intensity training program. On May 1st, 1973, Casey weighed 166 pounds. I'm not trying to mislead you. This was an underweight condition for Casey. When he won the Mr. America, he weighed around 212 or 215. So he was underweight to begin with. In 4 weeks, training 30 minutes a day, 3 days a week. May 29, 1973. Same month, same year. Casey weighed 212 pounds. In 1 month, exactly 28 days, Casey gained what demonstrably seems to be 46 pounds. Now, you don't know if that's 46 pounds of muscle, 46 pounds of fat, or a combination of fat and muscle. But the exercise physiology department conducted a very sophisticated body fat test called the radioisotope assay test, which showed that Casey lost 17 pounds of body fat during that 28-day period. So we know all the weight that he gained was pure muscle tissue. And it wasn't 46 pounds. Since Casey also lost 17 pounds of fat at the same time, he actually gained 63 pounds of muscle. But again, this was muscle that he had previously held, and all bodybuilders know it's easier to get bigger the second time around. Once you lose mass, it's easier to regain it the second time. The problem is the acquisition of new muscle mass. But it's still an incredible achievement. He was gaining more than 2 pounds of muscle a day. I talked to people who were present at the experiment, and they said you could literally see Casey grow before your very eyes, growing like a weed. Again, how did he do it? He averaged 30 minutes of training 3 days a week. That comes out to a total of an hour and a half of training a week. Times 4 weeks, that's 6 hours of training. It took Casey 6 hours of training to stimulate 63 pounds of muscle growth. An unbelievable achievement, incredible. Whether it was new mass, old mass, whatever, it's still an incredible achievement. What I want to do is contrast that with something our friend Mr. Schwarzenegger did. You may recall in July 1975, he finished making the movie Stay Hungry and began his training for his last deserved Mr. Olympia win in 1975 at a body weight of 210. He was also underweight. For the movie Stay Hungry, he was forced to reduce his body weight, and he looked rather emaciated at 210. As a matter of fact, I was in Gold's Gym that day, a very naive young Mike Mentzer seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger. He did his first workout for his last deserved Mr. Olympia title, which he won in November of 1975. 4 months later, he claims he weighed 225 pounds when he won that last contest. Although there were people who were present, John Balick and Albert Busek claimed he only weighed 218. but we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. Arnold gained 15 pounds at least of muscle in this 4-month period. This was not a sophisticated study, as was this one. So we don't know if Arnold lost any fat during this period. Probably he did. So we don't know. It wasn't that controlled of a study. But we know he gained at least 15 pounds of muscle. How did he do it? Well, he's gone on record several times. He even boasts about it. And he trained 4 hours a day, 6 days a week, for 4 months. And if you're real fast with your arithmetic, you'll find out that comes out to a total of 288 hours spent in the gym. It took Arnold 288 hours in the gym to stimulate 15 pounds of muscular growth. And he was not successful in regaining all the mass he had previously held, because in 1974, his best Mr. Olympia condition, I feel, where he weighed 237, he was just awesomely huge. It was his heaviest ever Mr. Olympia. And I even asked Arnold a couple years ago, why were you so light in South Africa? Why did you not go back up to 237? He said, I simply didn't have the time. He had 4 months. He had 4 months to gain back 27 pounds. He did not succeed. Casey gained 63 pounds in 1 month. How do you account for the discrepancy or the disparity in achievement? All we have to go on, according to this, is the amount of time they spend training. That's the only variable we can compare. I do know this, however. Arnold has gone on record as saying he did take steroids. And according to Casey, according to Dr. Elliott Please, who conducted the Colorado experiment, Casey Viator definitely was not on steroids. That's hard to believe, but it's on record. Arnold is on record as saying he did take steroids for that Mr. Olympia. That variable is different. But the only other variable we have to go on is this. 6 hours versus 288 hours. And the other explanation? They were both underweight to begin with. And it's true that Casey was even more underweight, so he had the opportunity to gain more weight back. But at least Casey was successful in gaining back all the weight he had previously held. Arnold had 4 times as much time, but still could not regain all the mass he had previously held. He had 4 months to do it. Casey had 1 month to do it. So actually, Casey's task was harder. Arnold had 4 months to gain back 27 pounds and could not do it. Casey had 1 month to gain back 63 pounds. That's the weight he weighed in Mr. America, and he succeeded in doing it. And Arnold couldn't do it. Why couldn't he do it? What's the answer? What's the answer you think I'm looking for? Right. There are 2 factors. Arnold trained so long, he overtrained so much, he could not train with the intensity required to stimulate that much muscular growth. And even if he did train with the intensity required, he didn't allow enough time to recover and allow that growth to manifest itself. When you talk about an exercise session, one isolated single exercise session, there are 2 factors to consider. The intensity factor and the duration factor. Duration is the amount of time spent training, and intensity refers to the percentage of momentary effort. And this term intensity tends to be misunderstood. Some people think that by increasing the duration of their workouts, they're increasing the intensity, which is ridiculous. It's just the opposite. Every time you increase the duration, you have to decrease the intensity. These 2 things exist inversely to each other. They're mutually exclusive. You can't have a lot of one and a lot of the other. It's demonstrated by a very simple inverse ratio graph. It demonstrates the universal relationship that exists between intensity and duration. This is not a brainchild of Mike Mentzer. This is a basic law of physics. Universal principle. It applies to all activities, not just weight training, chopping down trees, studying books, sex, whatever. The more intensely you do something, whenever the intensity increases a little bit, the duration has to decrease a lot. And if you want to build big muscles fast, then you've got to train as intensely as possible. Because that is the one factor most responsible for building mass. And if you want to build mass, you've got to train for short periods so you can train intensely. That's the nature of the relationship. You can train either hard or you can train long, but you can't train hard and long. It's impossible. Not because I say you can, but because it's impossible. Is there anybody who thinks it's impossible to train hard for 2 hours? Nobody can train really hard. When I talk about hard, I mean maximally. All-out effort for 2 hours. If you train as hard as you possibly can, each and every set, then the majority of you in here cannot train in 30 minutes. I'm talking about as hard as you possibly can. Every set to total failure with minimal rest in between sets. Just enough rest between sets so you can go to your next set, resume your next set, and go to muscular failure as opposed to cardiovascular failure. That is not rush so fast that your cardiovascular system becomes the limiting system. You want to go to muscular failure. If you do that, you will probably not train in 30 minutes.
How long might you be training? Would that be 30 seconds?
It doesn't matter. It's going to vary from muscle group to muscle group because of the demands placed on the cardiovascular system. You rest just long enough between sets so you can resume the next set and go to muscular failure as opposed to cardiovascular failure. In other words, if you're doing your legs and you're just going from one set to another, and the second set terminates because you're breathing so hard, as opposed to true muscular failure in the legs, then you didn't rest long enough. See what I'm saying? Any questions about this? It's not even debatable. Like Robert Kennedy said in his nice editorial, it's fact, not theory. It's immutable. I mean, this is one of the basic laws of nature. You ever compare the calves of a sprinter to the calves of a distance runner? I use this example all the time, but it's one of the best there is. The sprinter always has a large muscular calf. The sprinter always has, or the distance runner always has a stringy little calf. Because he overtrains, he's chronically overtraining. And I would venture to say the majority of bodybuilders, top bodybuilders today who are training over 2 hours a day, would look like distance runners if they weren't taking steroids. They're so grossly overtrained. You just cannot recover from that much training. We talked about it earlier. During the demonstration phase of the seminar, what's the first thing your body has to do after a workout? You stimulate growth first, hopefully. If you train hard enough and stimulated growth, you will grow, but what has to happen first of all? Recover. If you allow enough time for recovery, then you have to allow enough time for growth. If you do those three things, stimulate growth, number one, allow enough time for recovery, it does take time, up to 48 hours in some cases, depending upon the severity of the exercise and the volume of the exercise. Then another block of time is required for that growth to manifest itself. Growth never precedes recovery. Recovery always comes first. You don't need a 21-inch arm to survive, but you do need to continually recover and replace your precious physical resources and reserves. If you didn't continually recover from exercise, obviously you would die very rapidly, very soon. You've got to stimulate growth first through high-intensity training, allow enough time for recovery, and then allow enough time for growth. If you train, again, before recovery takes place, then the growth process can't take place. Because now you've got to recover from that next workout again. If you allow enough time for recovery to take place, but not enough time for growth to take place, you still won't grow. It takes time to recover and it takes time to grow. So I'm saying you should rest from anywhere from 48 to 72 hours, between workouts. 6-day-a-week training is always a mistake for the purpose of building muscular mass. If you want to build definition or create definition, then you can't be active enough. Train every day, all day, whatever you want to do.
If you're training different body parts,
Yeah.
and you're
I'm not talking about localized muscle recovery. I'm talking about recovery of the physical system as a whole. Localized muscle recovery actually takes place very rapidly. But you do 10 sets of squats, very, very heavy squats on Monday. Your legs may have recovered by Tuesday, but try to do a heavy back workout on Tuesday. You won't feel the inclination because your whole system has been called upon. Demands have been made upon all the body's recuperative subsystems, not just the legs. The whole system is called upon. You've got to allow the whole body to recover, not just the legs.
Just curious though, if a person's routine, let's say one of the person that trains 20 sets per body part, okay, you're saying that obviously it's not intense enough to stimulate growth, first of all, but
right.
Also you're saying
it's also making too many inroads into his recovery ability.
Okay, well, if it's not, how would that be if it's not intense enough to stimulate growth? How would it be intense enough to tax the reserves?
It's not a strength reserve anyway.
Yeah. But like, is that low intensity? Would it do anything?
If it was low intensity, would it what?
Would it
build endurance, yeah.
Well, not
okay, this refers to specificity of training effect. If you want to train specifically for building muscular size and mass, then you train in a specific manner. If you want to train for endurance, you train in another fashion. The guys who are doing 20 sets of body part are dividing specificity. They may be inducing a little growth stimulation, but not that much, because part of their training or their adaptive reserve is going towards cardiovascular training. See what I'm saying? Anybody else? Any questions on intensity? You know what intensity means? Percentage of momentary effort.
What about different types of muscle cells, like white and red muscle cells, and the difference in what they do for you? Can you train them both at the same time?
Red and white muscle fibers.
Yeah.
That whole question is fraught with controversy. I was recently in Holland and talked to a Dr. John Voss, an eminent exercise physiologist who was actually the first guy to ever do research on red and white muscle fibers. And he claims the whole thing's a bunch of hokum, because your muscle fibers actually change color from minute to minute. He actually did muscle biopsy on his own leg. He's a distance runner. This was 10, 15 years ago. And he would take biopsies every day on his calf muscles and found they would change color every day. And he believes they'll change color from minute to minute, depending upon things like temperature, activity, metabolic rate, and so forth. So there's no way you can devise an exercise program based on what you think is your predominant muscle fiber type, red or white or whatever. Even if that were the case, you did have more fast twitch as opposed to slow twitch muscle fibers. Again, as we talked about, as I tried to emphasize during the demonstration part, it's very important that you initiate all your movements very deliberately, slowly, under control. Once the speed of an exercise exceeds a certain rate, momentum takes over. And what happens to muscular involvement? It's reduced, it's diminished. Intensity refers to the percentage of momentary muscular effort. Anything that reduces momentary muscular effort reduces intensity and thereby reduces results. What you want to do is increase muscular involvement, not diminish it. Anything you can do to make the exercise harder, thereby increasing muscular involvement, again, that's the name of the game. It's so damn obvious. Either you train, think about it this way. We all said in the very beginning that growth does not come easy. Anybody here thinks growth comes easily? Anybody want to challenge that? Has anybody grown too fast this year? No, we all know growth doesn't come easily. You literally have to force growth. Now you tell me how you force growth with light weights, mild exertion, easy workouts. The harder you train, the faster you grow. But the harder you train, the less time you can spend training. It's as simple as that. Again, the intensity and duration relationship is the universal one. It doesn't exist just for Mike Mentzer. There are some people who are fond of saying that it works for Mike Mentzer, it works for Casey Viator, it works for Ray Mentzer, but it works for no one else in the world. Or we all have vastly different requirements. And yet these same people all train alike. Arnold does 20 sets, 6 days a week. Franco does 20 sets, 6 days a week. Frank Zane does 20 sets, 6 days a week. If they're all so different, why do they train exactly alike? The point of the matter is we aren't all that different physiologically. We're all unique as individuals. But when a young man goes to medical school, or a young woman, and studies muscle physiology, whose physiology is he studying? Everybody. We all have the same muscle physiology. The biochemical changes leading to muscle growth in Mike Mentzer are the same in Robert Kennedy, Chris Lund, and you. And me. And it follows from that the specific stimulus required to induce those biochemical changes leading to muscle growth in Robert Kennedy and you and me is the same. What is that stimulus? High-intensity muscular contraction. It's universal. It's a medical fact, not subject to debate. Simple as that. What is true, and this is where the confusion comes in, is that we all grow at different rates of speed. I might grow faster as a result of high-intensity training. But we all will grow faster when each of us trains more intensely. If you're not training, or if you're not gaining fast now, or if you're not gaining at all, you'll gain faster when you train more intensely. Chris Lund will gain more rapidly when he trains more intensely. He may not gain as rapidly as me, yet then again he may gain more rapidly than me.
Why is that though?
Because of innate adaptability. We all have different innate adaptabilities to exercise. Age, existing physical condition, motivation, a lot of different factors. But the underlying muscle physiology is the same. The people who say we all have different training requirements are entirely wrong. They're ignorant of the basic facts regarding muscle physiology. If we all had different physiologies, medical science could not exist. The doctor would have to study each individual as a separate physiological entity and then learn all the intricacies of his physiology and devise medicine around him. We could not have medical science. The very fact that they could take the basic principles of physiology and apply it to the whole human race is what makes medical science a viable discipline. Make sense? Sounds damn good. Any questions? I can't make it any simpler than that. I mean, all the theoretic and academic bullshit aside, I mean, it just follows from common sense. The harder you train, the faster you grow. But it's also true, you can't forget, that the harder you train, the less time you can spend training. Just like the faster you run, the less distance you can run. Sure, you can train as hard as possible for 30 minutes, then diminish the intensity and train for 8 hours after that. That's not going to result in anything except reduced progress.
Has the biggest progress probably this last year been made by flats?
Yeah, absolutely.
Following on those principles?
We were just talking about that before you came. Tom trained extremely hard all year. He was the one guy I saw in Gold's gym all winter long. I think Chris may have seen him. Who just went to failure on every single rep. And I remember saying to my brother Ray, this guy's serious. I had no idea what he looked like underneath the sweatsuit because he was always covered up. But when I saw him by my poolside 2 weeks ago, I just couldn't believe my eyes. He put 12 pounds of muscle on his upper body alone. Now his delts and pecs and back almost match his legs, which again, along with his masseter muscle, are among the greatest medical phenomenon I've ever seen. It's true.
What's happening regarding the research on this theory of muscle fibers splitting?
Hyperplasia is the splitting of muscle fibers. It's believed that by certain exercise physiologists that if you train a certain muscle intensely enough or severely enough, the muscle fibers are going to split. But it's never been proven conclusively. And I talked to the same doctor, Dr. John Voss, who's very involved in this kind of research. And he believes that it does not exist. And it was my humble opinion that it did not exist either, because if in fact you could increase muscle fiber density through the splitting of fibers, then you could increase a person's mass potential in any given muscle group. A guy like Yor Marati, who has almost no pectoral development, if you could split those muscle fibers and increase the fiber density, that is the number of fibers per square inch, then he could potentially have a pec like Pascal someday. That'll never happen.
Okay, can we just go maybe to basics? Like, I've heard a lot of different theories. For instance, I've heard theories like the cells in, say, your muscle, after you stimulate them, the way they grow is they get bigger. And then
Right.
I've also heard that they split and you get two smaller, or some
that's
similar
hyperplasia.
process to mitosis or something like that. So would it be that the cells get larger then?
Well, that's always been the theory that the physiologists believed in, that the cells themselves grow young.
So we always keep the same amount.
The same amount of muscle cells and fibers. Hyperplasia would believe the opposite. You would split and increase the number of fibers. There's no proven one way or the other. But again, a lot of this can be chalked up to mental masturbation. All of the academics aside, what really counts is that you get your ass in the gym and train hard. And if you're training 6 to 8 hours a day, you're not training hard. It's laudable from one standpoint. You're devoted. You're willing to be diligent and put a lot of work in. But that has nothing to do with progress. Sure, you point to a guy like Roy Callender, who's got the most muscular, heavily muscled physique in the world, who trains 8 hours a day. You try training 8 hours a day and see what happens. You'll end up looking like a jockey. Skinny little run. If these guys weren't taking steroids, they would look like jockeys. And you got to look back to the early part of the careers of these guys. Really, like Arnold. Arnold was a power lifter in Austria. He had just about as much muscle mass when he came to America as he did when he was in Germany. What he succeeded in doing when he got here was getting rid of all his baby fat, which he succeeded in doing through sheer dint of physical activity. If you do anything for 4 hours a day on a reduced calorie diet, chopping down trees, what have you, jumping up and down, you're going to get ripped. You don't have to lift weights to get ripped. I've seen ripped athletes who never lifted weights just because of their high metabolic rates and reduced food intake or whatever. They had no subcutaneous fat, giving the illusion that they were ripped. You don't have to do concentration curls to get defined biceps. You don't have to do thigh extensions, as Arnold Schwarzenegger told Wide World of Sports to 30 million people, to get thigh definition. I couldn't believe that one. Here, the most respected authority in bodybuilding was telling 30 million people that you had to do thigh extensions to get cut-up thighs. Don't do squats, they'll make your thighs smooth. If anything, squats are by far the best definition exercise. Why? Because they burn more calories. It is the burning of calories beyond what you take in the form of food that leads to the creation of definition. The more calories you expend, the more likely you're going to become defined. Thigh extensions don't burn anywhere near the number of calories heavy squatting does. What's the logic anyway? Why would thigh extensions lead to the creation of definition as opposed to squatting? It doesn't. What am I missing there? Can anybody explain it to me? Another one is, we talked about before, wide grip chins. It's a long-held traditional belief, the quote, so-called science of bodybuilding. If you want to widen your lats, stretch your shoulder girdle, whatever. I think that was Arnold's advice to Tom Platz, to do wide grip chins and make his back wider. You build wider lats. But again, just the opposite is true. Picture your lat or any muscle as a rubber band stretched between 2 points. Your lat attached here under the tricep, here on the lower back. Where are those 2 points furthest apart? And when is that rubber band stretched the greatest? When those 2 points are furthest apart. When your arm is straight overhead in a close grip position. It's 180 degrees. When you go to a wide grip, look what happens to the angle. It's closer and closer to a 90 degree. And the stretch becomes reduced. If you want to stretch your lats, Christ, do close grip chins, not wide grip. What's some more of the conventional wisdom? Easy curl bars for building biceps. It's the worst thing in the world you can do for building biceps. Again, we talked about it before. The primary function of the bicep is not to flex the forearm. It's to what? Supinate. You can prove it to yourself by putting your arm in this position. Try it. You'll believe me. Put your hand in the gooseneck position, pull your arm back, put your other finger on your bicep. You'll feel it's not even tense, it's soft. Now supinate the hand and see what happens. An easy curl bar pronates the hand, takes the tension off the bicep. What you want to do is hypersupinate the hand. You've got to use at least a straight bar to work the bicep. Easy curl bar works the brachialis and forearms. Doesn't work the bicep almost at all. And again, this is conventional bodybuilding wisdom, the truth. You've got to use an easy curl bar because Arnold uses one. Or somebody.
Like, it almost sounds impossible, like with your testing training, if you were to work it on your own, without a partner.
No.
You wouldn't gain.
It's not true. I keep getting that in my seminars. I don't know why. People think they have to have a training partner to train hard.
Well, it does help, though. You can't push yourself harder when you do it.
Well, there are certain exercises where you obviously can't do force reps, perhaps negatives, without a training partner. But the vast majority of exercises, if you use a little innovation, you can devise ways of doing force reps. For example, in the dips, you stand on a chair. You go into the top position and continue to lower yourself, or use your feet as an aid. If you don't have a training partner and you want to do force reps for your arms, you do concentration curls using the free hand to assist. If you're doing dumbbell laterals, you want to continue doing negative or forced reps. When you can't do any more positive reps, you curl the weight to here, extend the arms out, and lower slowly under control. Very simple. There's a lot of things you can do. Chinning. Just step up on a chair while the Nautilus, walk up the steps, go into the top position. But even if you can't do those things, you still train as hard as you can. You at least go to positive failure. And it may be that you don't have to train with 100% intensity. It's never been proven conclusively that you have to train with 100% intensity to induce maximum growth stimulation. Maybe it's only 85%. But there is definitely a threshold of intensity you've got to pass beyond to stimulate muscular growth. There's a certain threshold called the threshold of intensity beyond which you have to go to stimulate growth. Maybe it's only 85%, but I ask you the question, how do you accurately measure 85% intensity? There's only two measurements of intensity you can measure accurately, 0% and 100%. When you're not exerting yourself at all, that's 0% intensity. And when you're exerting yourself maximally, as hard as you possibly can, you can't push any harder, then you know you're pushing 100%. And when you're pushing 100%, you know you can't go any further. You know you've passed beyond the threshold of intensity. How can you go beyond 100%? It's impossible. Maybe you only needed 90%. But as long as you pass over 90%, you're safe. You know you've stimulated growth. So you're safe in going to failure every time. And there are some people who simply don't want to train this way. It's only recommended for those who want to stimulate maximal increases in size and strength. It's not for the casual enthusiast. It's for the serious bodybuilder, the obsessive nut. That'd be a little crazy.